Okay, this is my midterm project about Ableton Link software. It's called Link Innovations for Improvisations. One of the most common and most satisfying things about being a musician is the ability to join into another group of similar minded musicians and become a part of that community, whether it be large or small, in that moment. Jamming, as cliche as that term may be, is one of the greatest parts of being an instrumentalist. As old as music itself, human beings have enjoyed the oneness and spiritual nature of creating and making music in the moment with other people. This is something that most acoustic and traditional electronic instrumentalists have enjoyed without much thought. And then came electronic music. Over time, electronic music brought with it a multitude of new technologies and protocols. Major additions to this revolutionary change were synthesizers, sequencing, and musical instrument digital interface, or MIDI. MIDI sequencing gave producers and electronic musicians not only the ability to sync otherwise impossible machine-based rhythms and electronically generated arpeggiations, but the ability to connect all of these devices and play other instruments with one piece of gear. That was called the sequencer. Sequencing became a huge part of pop music in the late 70s and early 1980s. The problem with sequencing and other machine-based music was just that. It was entirely based on the machine or the sequencer. The biggest problem with this was the limited ability for electronic musicians to just jump into a room with others and join into the festivities. In order for someone with another sequencer to connect and stay in time with others was to stop everything, connect to a clock or slave, to one sequencer or controller. That is where the major mood killer reared its ugly head. Now we'll start with a setup of a simple MIDI configuration. Doesn't look too simple. You start with a sequencer. Sequencer in its basic form sends MIDI messages in a certain particular order across 16 different channels. Each channel then, in turn, sends note and note value information, velocity information, and other information in a sequence to all the machines in the chain. Each machine would then be set to its own channel, and all information for that channel would be recognized by that particular machine, whether it be a keyboard, drum machine, or synth engine. All the information for other channels would be passed through and sent to the next machine in the chain. The sequencer was usually set to the master, and all other devices would be set to slave. Each device had to be set up for its own channel and set through its own internal menu to its slave setting. You can imagine the time it would take to set this up for even a couple or three people with their own instrument, much less a whole group of people with multiple machines apiece. This was the standard for nearly 4 decades. The other complicated thing about this setup was that none of it was automated. The setup essentially had to be done manually each time new instruments were added or the location was changed. This situation made it nearly impossible to have an improvisational session like other traditional musicians enjoyed. Therefore, all electronic music tended to be one or two people with pre-written tracks, the equivalent to a DJ performing songs that were for the most part already produced and sequenced with very little room for any change. Now, throughout the early 1980s came the birth and evolution of the Digital Audio Workstation, or DAW, or DAW. These computer-based programs were used for sequencing and audio recording in a graphical user interface. This made sequencing a little more intuitive, but it was still based on that same master-slave relationship of MIDI and did not add much additional usability to the MIDI protocol. In 2001, the German company Ableton Live introduced a DAW designed for live performance, and over the following decade would add hardware and features that integrated the DAW with live hardware to bridge the gap between live synthesis and the interface associated with DAW Workstation. In 2016, they added another innovation that would change the way electronic musicians were able to interact. This new addition was called Ableton Link. Link is a revolutionary extension to the Ableton Live family that allows users to push a button in the Ableton layout and connect using Wi-Fi to any other Link-enabled device. There is no setup, no wiring, no channel allocation, and no internal menu selection. The user just clicks the link button and it automatically connects to any other devices on the network. The internal clock is automatically synced and all devices are in turn set in time. One of the biggest advantages of Link is the removal of the master-slave relationship of the previous technologies. With Ableton Link, anyone in the chain can change tempo information. This means that if one musician is primarily the percussion part or parts, that person can change the tempo easily on all other devices connected. On the other hand, if another person takes the lead control or percussion or just decides their part does not quite sound correct at the current tempo, they can adjust the tempo of all other instruments on the network. It is that simple. Here's a slightly lengthy video showing how easy and quick the setup is between 3 separate devices. It's about 4 minutes. The MacBook Pro is running Ableton Live 9, and the iPad and iPhone are both running Novation's Launchpad app with Link. I enable Link on each one, and then it is ready to go. Now I can use any loops and samples that are set up within each app, and they will all be in time. Then if I decide the samples on one device should be slower or faster, I just change the tempo speed on that. You'll see. Okay, so it's pretty simple. I've got some just some random drum loops, guitar loops, audio, piano and synth, and then some bass lines. And then I'm going to open on the iPad here, Novation's Launchpad. And I'll also open on my iPhone Launchpad. Click the link button here on Ableton. Right there you see it says 2 links, so it's already picked up both of these immediately. I'll go in here to the menu real fast. Here's your tempo, Ableton Link, just a little switch right there. And here's our tempo. I'm going to set it at 120 beats per minute. And we're going to start a loop. Here's some guitar. Bring in some percussion. And here you can see no wires, no connection. Bring in some drums on the iPad. Bring in a little bass line on the iPhone. I should also mention that the iPad is my 9-year-old daughter's. And drums on the iPad. And she got this on her own to play along with me. So. A little vocal on the iPad. And a vocal on the iPhone. Now I can change the beats per minute on here. We'll go down to about 105. And you hear everything changes with it. Now I can also do that here. Open the metronome here. And bring it back up to 120. So there you go. Very easy. Now, one of the most exciting aspects of the Link addition to Ableton Live is that the Ableton team not only designed the Link feature, but they opened the code up to any software or hardware provider that wanted to use the code in their own apps and programs. This has enabled other creators of apps and DAWs to add Link to their own releases, furthering the ability to connect more and more devices together. This extends the family of applications that uses the Link software and gives musicians the ability to use the best app for their particular style or whatever application they are most comfortable with. This technology enabled Ableton open source like sharing of their design will, and has already really, changed the landscape for live focused electronic based musicians. It has given them the ability to bring their ideas and creations together and make improvisational and new electronic music like like traditional musicians have enjoyed for centuries. As more and more companies adapt and incorporate the Link technology into their software and hardware, the further this ability to bring your own instruments and tracks to a session and on-the-spot improvisational music moments will no longer be something confined to guitar players, pianists, and drummers, but will include samplers, sequencers, synthesizers, and DAW-based workstations like Ableton Live.